Hello, welcome back. This is the second installment of Land and Sea, Carl Schmitt, where we're going over all the different sections of this very interesting book. And I'm just going to break down kind of bit by bit what he's talking about here. So, this section, we're going to really deal with sea powers and the emergence of sea powers and the distinctions between the stages of sea powers and some of the influences that have informed Carl Schmitt in his observation of these kind of philosophical and geopolitical distinctions between land powers and sea powers. There's certain kind of characteristics to some of these sea powers, which he notes. He says everything that the England swooners from the 18th to the 20th centuries have admired in England has already previously admired in Venice. The great wealth, the diplomatic superiority with which the sea power knew how to exploit the oppositions between the land powers and to conduct its wars through others, the aristocratic constitution, which appeared to have solved the problem of internal political order, the toleration with respect to religious and philosophical opinions, the asylum for liberal ideas and for political emigration. To this, there is added the enchanting charm of splendid festivals and artistic beauty. One of these festivals has particularly occupied the human imagination and helped to bear the fame of Venice, the myth-shrouded marriage with the sea, the so-called, okay, it's in Italian, I'm not going to try to pronounce it. But anyway, you get the point. There's a certain character to some of these sea powers, which is consistent through time. And of course, we should make the point here that Schmitt is not like totally disparaging of sea powers. He doesn't think like, because obviously he's speaking from a German perspective, which is a land power perspective, but he's not totally disparaging of sea powers. He is complimentary to them in many ways. He just will, as we'll see, he just sort of notes a certain problem which emerges from sea powers, but you will get into that. Okay, so this is, in my opinion, the most interesting part of this section, where Schmitt will reference a German philosopher called Ernst Kapp. Ernst Kapp was, I think, he was a 19th century philosopher, and I think he was like a geographer or geographist, however you say it, I'm not sure. But he was also a philosopher. This is really important because we're really talking about space and elements and the use of space and the use of elements in an analysis of geopolitics and history of ideas, geopolitics, philosophy, and so forth. So Ernst Kapp is an interesting figure because, you know, he has this two areas of interest, geography and philosophy, which is obviously sort of, we can see what inspired Schmitt in this regard. So you got three stages basically to sea powers, and this could also be distinguished by the categories of river, sea, and ocean. So the first is the Potamic period, river culture of the Orient, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Tigris of the Nile, etc. So these are sort of obviously these cities, these civilizations that emerged on rivers that normally had access to the coast, but they were more of a river culture. Their trade, their way of life, and so forth was more based around the river. And then you have the Thalassic period, inland seas, Rome, Greece, Europe in the medieval times with the Mediterranean. So yeah, Rome, even though Rome was a land power, obviously they still had access to the Mediterranean, and they still had a navy and so forth. Again, Greece is kind of split between Athens, which is more of a sea power, and Sparta, which is more of a land power. They obviously had access to the Mediterranean, and Venice and so forth. So you're talking antiquity and the medieval era, Europe. but it's all surrounding the Mediterranean, and it's, you have sea powers emerging, but they're more sort of coastal, right? They're more coastal. I suppose their use of ships with less open seas and open oceans. It's more sort of coastal travel. And then you have the open ocean period. And this is when the kind of North European, Germanic peoples, Vikings, so on, later on you have America, the British Empire. And this is more conducive to open ocean travel, and the circumnavigation of the Earth as well, which we're going to get into. As Schmitt will mention, at the time of Venice, the sea battle was done more with oars and kind of close quarter combat when there would be naval battles. So up until that point, people would kind of board each other's ships and slam each other's ships into each other. And then, there was changes in sails, how we use wind power to sail a ship. That sort of took over from oars. And also the invention of the compass was extremely important. So Schmitt will say a particular nautical achievement was the perfection of the compass into its modern form. Through the compass, something spiritual is breathed into the ship, as a result of which the human enters into community and relationship with the vessel. And he's quoting Ernst Kapp there as well. Now, for the first time, the most distant terrains of all the oceans come into contact with one another, so that the globe expands. And then we have the 16th century, which sees another major change in sea powers and in maritime technology. So he says the transformation of the conduct of naval warfare occurred with the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 in the channel between England and the continent. The small sailing ships of the English proved themselves superior to the great Spanish ships of the state. It was, however, not the English, but rather the Dutch, who were at the time in the domain of shipbuilding technology, who were at the time the leaders, in the domain of shipbuilding technology. In the period from 1450 to 1600, the Dutch invented more new ship types than all other peoples. The mere discovery of new parts of the earth and new oceans would have not sufficed to establish rule over the world's seas and the decision for the sea as an element. There's a bit of a theme here, as we will see, with Schmitt's kind of historical analysis of the emergence of sea powers, with kind of technology stealing away the vitality and the maybe authenticity of certain relationships to elements, in this case being the sea. So what he means by this is he'll say, it's not noble doges, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, not noble doges or on pomp-laden ships of state, but rather wild adventurers and sea dogs, clever ocean strafing whale hunters and daring sailors are the first heroes of new maritime existence. In two essential domains, in whale hunting and in shipbuilding, the Dutch at the outset were far superior. Here I must say a word of praise of the whale and in honor of the whale hunters. It is not possible to speak of the great history of the sea and of the human decision for the element of the sea without commemorating the fabled Leviathan and his equally fabled hunter. Schmitt will write about Melville and his book Moby Dick. He'll say that Melville is for the world's oceans what Homer was for the Eastern Mediterranean. Melville wrote the story of the great whale Moby Dick and of his hunter, Captain Ahab, in a powerful tale, Moby Dick, and with it composed the greatest epic of the ocean as an element. He'd also mention Michelet was a French historian and wrote a poem, La Mer, which is kind of an ode to the sea. And interestingly enough, he sort of goes on this kind of, again, a kind of zoological analysis of whales and humans and the relationship between whales and humans, because whales are mammals. They don't really belong. They're not fish. They don't necessarily belong in the sea. Like some mammals, like seals, for example, will spend some time on land and some time in the ocean. Mammals, ocean mammals, are actually very intelligent compared to fish. So they're more like humans in that way. And I suppose he's kind of drawing a kind of a similarity between whales and humans insofar as that they can adapt to elements and environments which they're not necessarily suited for. The human is obviously more suited towards land, but he's able to sort of thrive and conquer in the ocean. And the whale is somewhat similar because it's a mammal, it's not a fish. But the biggest, but the most successful, the animals in the ocean which are on the top of the food chain are actually also whales, not fish. Schmitt will say that the whale hunters who are here under discussion were real hunters and not mere catchers. So they're not just like fishermen, right? They're not just catching something. They're actually out there hunting something. And certainly not mechanized whale slaughterers. From the south, from the North Sea or from the coast of the Atlantic, they followed their game through the vast spaces of the world's seas with sailing vessels or oar-drawn boats. And the weapon with which they took up this battle against the powerful and clever sea giant was a harpoon flung from the human arm. This was a life-endangering battle between two life forms, both of which, without being fish in the zoological sense of the word, moved in the element of the sea. All the aids that the human deployed in this battle were serviced by human muscle power: sail, oar, and the deadly projectile, the harpoon. The whale was strong enough to smash boat and ship with a single smack of its tail. The whale knew how to oppose human trickery with 1,000 tricks of its own. Herman Melville, who himself spent multiple years as a sailor aboard a whale fish hunting ship, sketches in his Moby Dick how here there enters what one could call a personal relationship, an inner enemy-friend bond between the hunter and his game. Here the human is driven even further into the elementary depths of maritime existence through its battle with the other life form of the sea. So, interesting note here is inner friend-enemy bond, because we tend to have a very vulgar view of the friend-enemy distinction in Schmitt. That person's over there. It's very tribalistic. It's a bit more nuanced here, and the human is drawn sort of to discover new places. He's drawn further and further into the oceans, into the horizons, through this sort of contest with this enormous monster. And it is an enormous monster. I mean, could you only imagine? Like, I've never seen a whale in real life, right? Have I? No, I have. Sorry, I have. But at least, when I was a kid, actually, I did. I saw killer whales on a boat in like Tenerife or somewhere, right? But this is a very safe environment. You're on a very large boat. And you sort of see pictures of killer whales and you see them on television and you kind of know what they are before you see them. You can only imagine, like, back in like medieval times or antiquity, being out on a little wooden boat or a little, oar powered ship vessel somewhere in the ocean and just coming across these like giant whales. Like, it would be terrifying. You wouldn't know what the hell they were, right? So there's this real sort of heroic adventure of the human into an element which is just so beyond his comfort zone. You see this with these whale hunters. And Schmitt will actually here in this section be very critical of the industrial whaling So he has a lot of admiration for the harpoon slinging, sailors that learned how to track and trace these which is an incredible accomplishment, to learn how to track an ocean animal in the ocean when you're just like in this tiny wooden boat. Learn how to track these animals, and put himself in extreme danger in order to hunt them. The industrial era, hunting of whales, which involved very little risk, and you have like machine powered projectiles and so on. It took all the fun out of it. It took all the challenge out of it. And it nearly exterminated the whale. And I think sometime in, like, what he says, yeah, in the years 1937 to 1938, an international convention was finally reached that set certain regulations for whale hunting, to protect the animal from extinction, basically. So, and Schmitt is quite critical of kind of industrial whaling and so forth. So, these whalers, these sort of pre-industrial era whalers, they were drawn out into the open oceans, through their hunting of these animals, and through that they sort of learned how to navigate the open oceans, and through that they discovered new lands and new places. And he says that it's here where we see the firstborn of a new elementary existence, the first new real children of the sea.